Hi, this is Joey. I'm at the Sunrise Flea Market. It's around 11:30. It's very hot. I have to wear these sunglasses. I'm going to share a message about the rapture. The rapture. Everybody knows. Everybody knows that Jesus is coming soon. There's a 7 years tribulation that's going to happen on earth. Christians, you don't have to be afraid. If you're born again and saved, you are not going to be left behind. We're all going to make it. If you have faith in Jesus Christ and what He did and born again, it doesn't matter if you're perfect or not perfect. Jesus died on the cross for us and made us perfect, but we don't have a license to sin. And how do we get ready? By believing that Jesus Christ died on the cross. So when the rapture comes, there's nothing for you guys to be scared of. When the rapture comes, this is why Tadamami Christians, because something's going to happen so terrible that most of the world don't believe. We believe. We are Christians. We are born again. We're going to be taken out of the way. We're going to have 7 years someplace where Jesus is, off the earth. We're not going to see the Antichrist. We don't care. We're going to do what we got to do, be with the Lord. We will meet the Lord in the air. 1 Thessalonians 4:13 says that we will meet the Lord in the air. He's not coming to earth because the earth is sinful. That's the first part of the rapture. For 7 years we're going to be with Him. All that stuff is going to go on. Where do we get the 7 years from? We get the 7 years from Daniel 9:24, 25, 26. So I do read the Old Testament. In this case, you have to read Daniel. When the book of Daniel ends, Revelation starts. What happened was Israel sinned. 490 days they sinned. They were sacrificing their own children to other gods. They was worshiping other gods. And God was mad at them. He's a jealous God. And He was right and correct. So He punished them 1 year for every day that they sinned. Now Daniel is praying and talking to God what's going to happen. The angel Gabriel came to Daniel and told him this is what's going to happen. And he said because there's 7 years that has to be finished. 483 years was finished from the time the temple was rebuilt and Jerusalem walls was rebuilt. That's in Nehemiah. And it says, count from there to the cross, 483 years passed away, and 7 years was left. That 7 years of punishment of Israel has to be finished. When God gives a promise, good or bad, He's going to finish it. He don't change His mind like we do. So the 7 years has to be ticked off the clock or the calendar. So we're going to not be here, but the world will experience that 7 years tribulation. Now, there's a time between the rapture and the signing of the peace treaty. Once the rapture comes, we're going to be raptured, and the 7 years will start when the Antichrist makes a deal with Israel. What happens is they sign a peace treaty for 7 years, and in the 7 years, that's when the 7 years start, when they sign the peace treaty. So there's a time span in between the rapture and the signing of the peace treaty. We're not going to be here, but this is something deep that I learned. Been studying end times prophecy since I got saved 30 years ago. The message is, pastors have to preach Christ crucified. We have to preach the cross and the covenant so that people will not get stuck during the rapture. The pastors got to start teaching about the cross, the new covenant, the Gospels. Well, Jesus preached the Gospels, Matthew 28, 18, 19. Well, Paul Penda, I preached the Gospel in so many scriptures. He didn't say, explain the Old Testament to the believers. They need to know about the Old Covenant. They need to know about the Old Testament. What we need to know is the four Gospels, the New Testament, the New Covenant. What Jesus did at the cross, the New Covenant. The Old Commandments, the law, was finished at the cross. The New Covenant of grace started at the cross. And this is what we have to learn. This is what we have to teach and preach. Rome are dying. People are dying. There's a prescription epidemic of drugs going on. Young men, young women are dying from OD, overdosed. People are dying in the hospitals. We could only hope that they were saved when they died. What about all the people that came to church and they heard long messages about Moses or Elijah or King David or something that doesn't show the cross, something that doesn't explain salvation very well? There's lots of Bible students that understand the Old Testament, but the average Christian comes to church. He wants to hear the Word. The Word is going to be long and confusing. They have to preach the cross, the Gospels. The Gospels is what saves us. The four books of the New Testament. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. This is where the salvation is. We need to preach the Gospels, not explain the Old Testament. The Old Testament is interesting. It's a lot of history. We could do that at home. We could read the Old Testament at home. Lots of good stories in there, but very little shown about the cross. You can miss it in a second. The pastor's got to preach the cross 24 hours a day whenever they're in church, Bible studies on the phones. Look what I'm doing now, carrying my Apple phone, preaching a message. God bless everybody. I have to stop before 10 minutes, and I shall do this again with the next message explaining more about the rapture. Father Christians, you have nothing to be afraid of. We want to be taken out of here. We see what's going on in the world. We see what's going on with tornadoes, hurricanes, volcanoes, everything that's devastating. Everything that's devastating. The Gage believe in global warming. That's not true. In the Bible it says we have 4 seasons. Day and night is always going to be there. It's the atheists, evolutionists that don't understand. They're called last day preppers. They're trying to save themselves with shelters, ammunition, food, to try to survive. The atheists know that something's going to happen. All they got to do is get a Bible. You could buy one for $5. You might even get one for free, and they don't have to go through all that trouble. We are going to be out of here. We're not going to be here for the 7 years tribulation. It's going to happen soon. Christians, this is what we're looking for. God bless.